All right, guys, welcome to episode 3 of the Pro 275 chassis build. Today, we are going to get started on the back half section of this chassis. As you can see, we've already got our 4-link brackets kind of mocked up in the car. And as I said in the videos before, we're going to be using the rear end and the 4-link bars just kind of honestly as a jig. And just because it makes it super easy to adjust these 4-link brackets right where they need to go, because obviously your 4-link bars are adjustable. I'm not going to mess with them because I've already kind of gotten everything set up where they need to be. So, kind of jump back into a little bit of what I said in the last video too, is I told y'all that we was going to be using all thread to get our section width right on our 4-link brackets. And as you can see, Derek got our all thread cut down to the right width that we needed. Set everything out on his nice flat table over here, measured everything, got it all put in there. And for us, there's several different ways that you can do this. But whenever you do this, we have these spacers that are the same thickness as a heim joint. So we use that spacer, put a bolt through it to keep the width and distance in between this 4-link bracket the same whenever we go to install them. So we put one in the top and the bottom, do that on both sides. And then obviously we just pick a hole, run our all thread through, make sure you're picking the same hole. You'll know because nothing will line up, but pick the same hole, top and bottom. Usually like to do a pretty good spread on them. That way it gets everything where it needs to be. But you got to run a bolt on the outside and the inside, and that's what kind of stabilizes it. And you got to do that on both sides. But you get all your bolts and everything ran up, you get them kind of snug, and then you'll lay it on a flat surface like this table right here. And then you'll take, and we laid that 4-link bracket up against the edge right here because obviously this is straight, and then did our measurements and got everything squared to where it needs to be. And you can take really anything that's a 90, and you can take and run it off of your all thread up against that 4-link bracket and make sure that they are square with each other. And then you're just going to need to take and do measurements and make sure that you got your section width right on your 4-link brackets. Now, some of y'all might be asking what section width is. Your section width is from the center of this 4-link bracket or heim joint right here to the center of this 4-link bracket and this heim. That is your overall section width of this 4-link. So this one is what, 22 inches?
Mm-hmm.
This one is right at 22 inches. And Derek told me to share with y'all my little, I don't know what I call it, tip, trick.
Just a nice little nugget of advice.
Nice little nugget. So what I was telling Derek, because Derek's still a little bit new to this stuff, so sometimes I show him a little something. But whenever you're measuring your section width, I've kind of got a little saying is wherever you start at. So if you start out measuring on the outside of this 4-link bracket, you need to finish your measurement on that same area on right here. So we started on the outside here. We're going to start on the outside of this 4-link bracket. So right there, as you can see, it's 22 inches from outside of this 4-link bracket to the outside of this 4-link bracket. Now you can move this over to the inside of this one here. Right there. Oh, it keeps moving on me. But you can start on the inside of that one and then to the inside of this one, 22 inches. Or if you want to measure from here, from the very inside here to the inside here, you're right at 22 inches. And then the outside to the very outside here, you're back at 22 inches. So just kind of a little saying is wherever you start at is where you need to finish that measurement at. Because I see a lot of people get confused, and this might be a little bit easier, but they'll start their measurement here, and then they'll measure all the way to the outside over here, which I've got this pulled out a little bit, and they'll measure all the way to the outside here. And well, man, this is a 1/4 inch off. Well, it's because this bracket is a 1/4 inch thick. So just start where you start at is where you need to finish at. But kind of a little small trick. Y'all may not get it, but it works for me. So, and I think Derek it helped Derek a little bit to understand. So, just a little trick whenever it comes to that stuff. But like I said, we got all this set up in the car. I've already got our 4-link brackets 90 because these are going to be the back side of the 4-link bracket is going to be 90 from the bottom side of our either jig table or our chassis itself, which our chassis is parallel to our table, so it's all the same thing. But we'll just take, you don't have a digital angle finder, you can use a standard, well, I don't know if they'd be called a mechanical one or just the one, what would they be called? Just a standard style angle finder, you know, it's got the little needle in it and everything, done by gravity.
Manual.
Yeah, manual one. Get a digital one. Makes life way easier than sitting there dicking off with that needle trying to get it, see exactly where it's at. But we'll just take this, zero it off of our chassis here. Then we'll stick it on the back side of our 4-link bracket, and right there we're at 89.8 degrees. So it needs to come, this bracket needs to lay back a little bit more. So all I got to do is take and run this 4-link bar out a little bit, and boom, we're at 90. So we can do that to both sides. I've got the bottom of this 4-link bracket. It's got a half moon in it to go around our lower number 1 bar. Got it up against there. Got this all 90'd. So now that we've got this 90'd exactly where it needs to be, now what we have to do is we need to take and make sure that our 4-link brackets are centered inside of our chassis. So we drew out a center line mark on our number 1 bar, and there's one on the table. So I never just go off of one measurement. Always take multiple measurements, and Derek can attest to this. I measure everything 2 or 3 times in multiple different measurements. So I'll take and measure from the inside of our brackets to the center line on both sides. Make sure that they're the same. We haven't adjusted these yet, but once they're the same, I'm also going to take and measure from the inside of my main hoop over on both sides and make sure that it's all the same. And if there's any variation in it, we'll take and manipulate it to where it's in the best location possible to be centered of everything. But that's kind of the first step of this. But like I said, we'll get all this centered up. We'll take and just tack the lowers in, or the lower part of the 4-link bracket. Once we get that in, then we start putting our upper crossbar in. So as you see, we got our upper crossbar bit. This is going to go in here like this. And now we can start getting some marks and getting everything notched to get this in there. So this is going to be our next step. Whenever we cut back to the next video, all this will be in, and we'll get started on doing the rest of the back half section. Boom. It's like YouTube magic, and we're done. We're not done, but as you can see, we've got our whole upper Y-bar in. We got our cross bracing in, and then we also got some nice little small gussets that are going from our crosses over into, or our diagonal bars into our 4-link brackets. So, give y'all a little rundown of why we've done some of this stuff and go from there. But obviously, this diagonal bar here is just a structural bar to tie in from your lower number 1 bar that ties in to your main hoop down here. You can see that's all kind of double jointed together, then ties up into this. That strengthens your upper bar, strengthens where your 4-link attaches to, but then it's also a safety aspect because that is a diagonal that is technically keeping anything from coming into the backside of the driver. This will also get sheet metal over this to help protect the driver, just like your driver 4 section also has metal in it. So that's partially what all this is for. You will probably see in some cars they don't have this extra gusseting here. The reasoning why we did this is just for one, mainly the strength of it, and 2, our 4-link brackets are a little bit taller than like the ones that some other people use. So with it having that extra length on it, we definitely want to make sure that we gusset these 4-link brackets very well. There will be several other pieces that are gusseted on these 4-link brackets. Well, obviously, we've got these upper ones. Whenever we do our dry shaft enclosure that runs down through here, there will be another bar that ties in from this side into the dry shaft structure. Obviously, from here over to it, and then from this one over to here. Reasoning for that not only is to help strengthen the 4-link brackets, but that's also to help strengthen and tie into the 4-link or the dry shaft enclosure. There'll also be, probably more likely once we do the double frame rail, there'll be some type of other gusset that either comes off of our lower inner frame rail up to the center of our 4-link bracket here, or down to this one. Haven't really decided yet, just going to kind of wait until we get to that point. And you may be asking yourself why we're doing so much gusseting on these 4-link brackets. Well, one of the main reasons is it's because most of the time this is one of your biggest fail points, just because this is where all the brunt and abuse is going on inside of the chassis. Every bit of that power that you have is getting driven to this axle, and then that axle is then leveraging these 4-link bars into these 4-link brackets here. So that's why there is so much gusseting going on in this point, just because of the amount of stress that is right here. And another thing too is, if anybody's familiar with tire shake, whenever a car tire shakes, man, it can break a lot of stuff. So we want to make sure we have these 4-link brackets gusseted enough to where if it does tire shake, if anything happens, they ain't going to crack, nothing like that's going to happen. Obviously, anything can happen, and you can see it to some of the best built cars. Whenever something tire shakes really hard, it can break a lot of stuff. But moving on from there, like we said before, we had the rear end housing mocked up in here, just sitting down, and we used our 4-link bracket or our 4-link bars to adjust our 4-link brackets to where they needed to be inside of the chassis. Well, once we got all that set and welded up, we then used our 4-link bars to set our rear end where it needed to be. Now, why it's important, or why we set our rear end where it needed to be, is for one, we needed to be able to look or set our ride height and check and make sure that all of our clearancing is good. And then 2, to go along with the ride height, we need to start on our back section, and we have to know our ride height and our shock length and everything to be able to mount our upper shock bar. So right now we have this rear end set at a 4.5-inch ride height, but we will make it to where it can go all the way down to a 3-inch ride height. But so we got, like I said, we got it set at a 4.5-inch ride height, and like I said, we're doing all this to be able to get our upper shock bar placement. So one of the big important things that you will need to know whenever you're doing this is you need to know what length, overall length shock you are using, and then what stroke it is, and then what its collapse length is. So on this car, like I've said before, it's going to be a radial car. So we're running a Mintzer. We're running a Mintzer coilover that is a, what is it? So it's 22 inches fully extended. It's a 8-inch stroke shock. So at fully collapsed height, it is 14 inches. And most of your radial stuff, if you ever talk to Metzer or any of the other shock companies, they usually like there to be 1.5 to 2 inches of shaft showing. So at ride height. So basically all you do is at your fully collapsed height is 14 inches on our coilover. Just add that 1.5 to 2 inches to that, which puts you at 15.5 to 16 inches. So then all you do is take, since we got our rear end set at ride height, you just use your shock bracket. We don't have ours here for this one, but you just set your shock bracket in here. We will then take a, was it 1x1? Mm-hmm. We'll just use a 1x1 piece of square tubing, drill a hole in the bottom of it, then measure up our 15.5 inches, drill another hole, and that will set in your shock bracket here, and then you run it up, and that's where your upper shock bracket needs to be for this, or for the top side of your coilover. It's a really easy way to do it. The nice thing about using the 1x1 is it's the same width as what your coilover eyelet is, and then so whenever you do your upper shock bracket, you ain't got to use any spacers or washers or anything like that. You can just mount them right to the outside of that 1x1, and then it's got all your spacing right and everything. And it makes it pretty easy because then you can just put a level on the backside of that 1x1, get it 90'd, and that's exactly where your coilover upper brackets need to go. So whenever it comes to setting coilovers up, a lot of times one of the easier ways to do it is to set your ride height at the absolute lowest point that it can go. So as low as the car can possibly ever sit, and then you can take and mount your shock bracket here at the very bottom, and then that way from there you can always move your shock adjuster up in here and it'll make the car taller. So that's one of the easiest ways to do it. Like I said, with this car, we're setting it up at a 4.5 inch ride height. It can go all the way down to 3 inch because that's what most of the rules are. You have to have a minimum of 3 inch ride height. So we'll have to make sure that we have enough adjustment down, at least an 1.5 inch adjustment down, to make sure that this car can get to that 3 inch ride height. But that should be everything. I know we said that we was going to complete the full back half in this video, but there's a lot of information in here. We didn't want it to get too lengthy, so we decided to break it up into 2 parts. Part 2 is going to be us just actually physically getting the back half section on here. We'll show y'all some of the details of doing that and the reasoning why there's so much bracing in that back half section. But like always, keep watching, subscribing, and we'll catch you on the next video.